We are live. Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi, and it's Tuesday, the 18th of February. Welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show.
What are we going to talk about tonight, Joe?
Well, I will tell you exactly what we're going to talk about. Okay, we're not. We're going to talk about the fact that I got a Perry Mason ringtone for my telephone. Okay,
Okay.
but actually, so I realized that I think the last snow forecast map that I made this winter was back about, I'm going to say, January 17th or 18th.
Right.
Okay, so here we are at February 18th. Haven't made one in a month, so I decided that I'm going to make one for North Carolina because because I there's nothing else going on. Now, I will say this. Okay, so looking at I was looking at went back and looked at the last 5 or 6 runs of the GFS. It does look like we're going to get into a better upper air as we head into the end of February, the beginning of March. That might be the window that we're waiting for that might open something up and create a possibility. But that's all we can say about it right now. Really, is that uh, it's not like we can point to anything specific. It's only the 18th of February, but I feel good about the fact that this little window of opportunity is going to open. Does anything happen in that window of opportunity? I don't know. If you asked me to bet, I would definitely bet against it. But that window, I think, is going to be there. So shall we look at what I'm doing for North Carolina?
Well, remember that in western North Carolina, those mountains run anywhere from 52 to 6,200 feet above sea level. So if you can't
Right.
get snow out of that,
Yeah,
I'm
but
going
actually, in this particular instance, Joe, I think you may wind up with more snow in eastern North Carolina than you will in western North Carolina, which would make it an even bigger insult for this area, because you could
to.
very well wind up seeing more snow as you get closer to the Carolina beaches than you will as you go to the west. It's just one of those setups, and this
Yep.
is one of those instances. Talked about this yesterday. Um, we actually have too much cold air. It's overwhelming cold air all over the eastern part of the U.S. And it's going to keep things dry and cold here for the rest of the week. But there's no way for anything to come up the East Coast. So let me bring up my Carolina map. Uh,
Okay.
this is this is what I did today. So I have to find it first. Hang on, I have it hidden here somewhere. Let's see if I'm going to be able to do this. Oh boy, how was your day otherwise?
Uh, like so many of the others in the past, just,
It happened.
it
It
happened.
was there. Okay, well, you know what? That's a good thing. Um, all right, let's. Here we go. And here it is. So I actually have two maximum areas. You just mentioned the one in western North Carolina, in the mountains, in the Smokies, in the Appalachians, down Route 81. So I have an area there where maybe up to a few inches possible, especially for the east facing mountains, because there's going to be more of a northeast wind here. So there'll be a shadow effect, I think, on the other side. So I've got that area as a max area. I also have an area that runs right along I-95, either side of I-95, where there could be the potential for up to a few inches. And I think in this particular zone, there's potential for some upside, depending on how much cold air bleeds down. And then on either side of those two boxes, you have central North Carolina, west of Raleigh, Durham, and talking about a coating to an inch there. And then when you go in easternmost North Carolina and down near the coast, I covered for maybe a coating to an inch. If for the outer banks, it may wind up being nothing over there. It may just be all rain along the outer banks. But this is what I was looking at, and I thought, you know what? Let me take a shot here and do something, because it's been so darn long.
You're getting out of practice.
Yeah,
It's
well, this is a good exercise actually, because when you're it is uncomfortable. I mean, I think it is. I think it's uncomfortable to have to forecast, but snow outside of your, outside of your home base. So it does help you fine tune your skills. I don't think, I think it's a pretty good exercise to do. Alfred Phillips is just he's out of the thought. He's apparently thought himself out and is up to 5 below 0 where he is in northern Alaska, and he's on the board tonight. So we want to give him a big hello.
Alfred Phillips also says hardly any snow at that 5 below 0.
Well, yeah, they don't get a lot of snow up on the North Slope.
It gets too cold for snow.
Correct. They're so just like we are going to be Wednesday and Thursday. We're going to be too deep into the cold air. So that's what I'm thinking here for North Carolina. Maybe it extends down into northern South Carolina, northeastern Georgia, and then the northern flank of that gets into southern Virginia. But as far as points further north than that, forget it. It's just not going to happen because the upper air is all wrong, and we're going to get into that momentarily. So let me bring up. I'm going to bring up the watches and warnings map that we have stuff going on tonight. And once again, Joseph, yeah, fairly quiet, with the exception being you've got some winter weather advisories up in, brace yourself, Maine. Okay.
Yeah.
Also in part of Nebraska, kind of cuts across the middle on a diagonal, and in southeastern Colorado, southwest Kansas. And you've got flash flood watches and some flash flood warnings up right now for parts of central Mississippi and into central Alabama because of all the rain that they've had. And now they're getting the next surge of rain, and they're going to get more of it as this wave begins to set up. But other than that, and some wind chill advisories that are up for parts of North Dakota and northern Minnesota, and a little corner in north central Wisconsin. Nothing much going on.
Yeah, it's just one thing after another. I did get a chance on the evening news to see some of the flooding concerns down in Mississippi around the Pearl River area, and it's just been unbelievable. They picked up, as compared to what they would normally have at this point in the year, they've had over a foot more rain than what they would normally have by this time in the middle part of February. And they're interviewing people down there, and one woman said, I can't even get near my home, and I'm pretty sure that everything inside us is flooded out. It's just crazy. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. They're under a marginal risk of severe weather by SPC, and I'm gonna. There's no severe weather forecast across the U.S. tomorrow, and no thunderstorms are forecast anywhere on Thursday. That's a rare event, but it does happen every once in a while. I'm going to bring up
in terms of snowfall, Joe. The Weather Prediction Center for tomorrow and again on Thursday have the entire country under no chance of 8 or 12 inches of snow. I mean, that's incredible when you think about something like that. I mean, in February of all months, no chance of any snowfalls exceeding 8 inches or 12 inches for the entire contiguous United States.
No, it's quiet and dry. You got high pressure pretty much from coast to coast, and except for the Gulf states, there's not much going on. The radar's loaded across the Gulf states right now with some, and there are some heavy thunderstorms in parts of northeast Texas, northern Louisiana, through central Mississippi, central Alabama, northern Georgia. They were looking. The SPC did put up a discussion about a possible severe thunderstorm watch going up for parts of central Alabama, central Mississippi, but they said it was unlikely. So that's about the only thing in that marginal risk area is producing a lot of rain, but we don't see. They're not anticipating putting up any kind of severe thunderstorm watch, at least from the last check that I saw. But all of this passing by to our south. Looks like we've got a little bit more work to do here with a few more showers. They've kind of thinned out back in Pennsylvania as of 7:12, and there's some patchy shower activity down in western Virginia and into Kentucky. There's more activity as you go north, from northward up the Hudson Valley and into New England. but seems to be a bit of a gap once you go from New York City southward toward Washington, D.C. and Baltimore.
And a lot of this rain is due to overrunning. We were talking about this yesterday about how places to the south would be a lot warmer behind that warm front as opposed to places to the north. Now, for example, up here,
Oh,
I have anything higher than 1 degrees. It's not out of the running yet, though, because the cold front is yet to arrive and the warm front is to our south. I'm hoping the warm front pushes on through before the cold front does, and actually we'll see temperatures rise during this evening into the maybe mid or even the upper 40s, considerably warmer to the south central and southern Jersey in the 50s right now. And meanwhile, up in the area around Monticello and the Catskills, hovering around the freezing mark with maybe some mixed precipitation up there.
yeah. I'm pulling up some of the temperatures here. Hang on 1 second. Yeah, it's Philadelphia is at 58. Looking like Atlantic City at the airport is 54. Looking at 50, what is that? Is that Vineland? Vineland, Jersey is 56. Upper 40s and low 50s as you go down into southeast PA. Then it starts to drop off. It's mostly like over me, it's 46 right now. Farmingdale's at 43. Islip is at 46 and Shirley is at 48. It's actually warmer as you go east than it is as you go west. Who's that 39? LaGuardia is just 39. They have a northeast wind there.
Yeah,
And, White Plains is 39. So, there's definitely a warm front that's moved into southwest, in southern New Jersey, where the winds have gone southwest. And then you head out into Pennsylvania. Uh, Either the winds are light northwesterly or there's hardly any wind at all. It's all a large area of the state where you have a whole bunch of stations reporting, not reporting any wind, which is kind of odd. And they're in the upper 30s and lower 40s. So, yeah, maybe you can push that warm front up briefly. You can see temperatures climb up before midnight or by early morning until the cold front passes. I think you got a shot there.
yeah, one of those loopy kind of warm fronts too.
Yeah, I got it on the 21Z map. They have it analyzed. Uh, there's an occlusion out of the low that's in southwest Quebec and north of Toronto, closer to James Bay than Toronto, really, on the Quebec side. And you have an occluded front that runs into eastern Lake Ontario, and that's where the point of occlusion is. So from there, the warm front runs southward to about Williamsport in Pennsylvania, and then turns east to about Trenton, uh, Sandy Hook, just off the south shore of Long Island. So it's there. It's not that far away, and the trailing cold front is just now making it through Pittsburgh, which probably means it gets to the coast at about 2 or 3 a.m.
And it also means that with a warm front in that position, that there are probably a lot of places with low visibilities due to fog as well.
Yeah,
Um, and Yeah, and you're right. Once that cold front moves on through, I'm expecting the skies to begin to clear probably by dawn tomorrow morning, and many folks who will be getting up and heading to work will probably be doing so under partly to maybe even mostly clear sunny skies.
well, we can
So
only hope.
just a matter of overnight tonight being kind of drecky, if I may use that term.
It works for me.
Yeah.
So here's how it looks on the satellite tonight. Big stream. You still have this long stream of moisture that's coming out from the Pacific across Baja California into Texas and then northeastward up toward Maine. And while that area is going to be shifting southward, there is going to be one more wave that's going to come out of this. But while all this is happening, you've got this cold high that is building down from Canada. We've got it a 1040. What is that? A 1040 high now. That's north of Montana, and it's definitely cold air because you're looking at temperatures below zero and lower as you go down as you go north up on the Canadian side. So this is a fairly decent shot of cold air that's coming down. And the problem is when we look forward here. I'm going to put the jet stream up before we go to the surface map, Joe. Uh, Again, you finally have the northern jet here is coming into play, but the problem is that it's shifting eastward. So you get this next trough that comes down, and it just suppresses. I mean, really suppresses everything. Considering what the pattern has been, it's rather hilarious that we're dealing with something that is actually too far south because there's too much cold air. But that's what you have, folks. You cannot bring a storm up the East Coast in any fashion when you have when you have a trough like this. You just can't. And unfortunately, for snow lovers anyway, you don't have. There's some ridging that's starting to pop up in the west for the first time in a while, but the trough in the east is already too far along. It's squashing anything that's down here in the Gulf states gets to fly out straight east northeast and has no chance to turn northward. None.
Right. It's a positively tilted trough, and by the time it becomes neutral and then negative, it's far out to sea, and that ends the ball game, so to
Right.
speak.
And then after that, I mean, we just pretty much go. We have this sort of you know not quite. It's somewhat zonal. It's all west to east, really. Weather systems moving along. The trough pulls out, which means the cold air pulls out, which means we're going to see temperatures bounce higher this weekend here in the Northeast. And then here comes the next weather system. You can see it right here. There's also a fairly strong trough coming into the Northwest. So this thing is going to be moving to the east for early next week. But now, of course, there's no cold air. The northern jet is way up here now, back up into Canada. You got this next thing swinging in. The lead system is just rolling along with no real strong definition. The thing is, it boils down to getting it where you get the cold air coming down, you get a system to come along in the southern stream in that west to east fast flow. It's got to time out perfectly, and it's not timing out perfectly for the system on Thursday, nor is it timing out perfectly for anything next Tuesday. And then after that, I think what's going to happen is, Joe, gradually the northern jet seems to get stronger and stronger, which allows for colder and colder air masses to come into the east. The GFS has been very consistent now for the last 3 or 4 days in its long range in doing this. And it actually starts to make its first appearance here at about on day 9. So we're actually kind of inside the 10-day time frame. Of course, day 9, you know what the date is on day 9? It's February 28th.
Which normally would be the end of the month. But of course, this year we're going to stretch this pitiful February out one extra day with leap year or leap day on the 29th.
Correct. So widening it out on the North America view, we do have, we've had these occasional moments with this sort of Canadian connection, and this is at day 9 here, where we're getting a northwest flow out of Canada from the northern jet. You've got a fairly active southern part of the jet stream moving weather systems along. So now we'll just have to wait and see when we get into those first days in March. The jet is pretty active in the north and in the south. So again, it's a long, because of the way the winter has been. You have to view this only as a long shot chance of something happening maybe in the first 10 days of the month of March, while we hold on to this slightly more favorable look for snow lovers. But this may wind up being the last chance, as far as I can see.
Well, maybe we'll be really surprised. I think this year Easter falls on April the 12th. So maybe this year we'll have a white Easter. And then
No.
we'll all be saying something like, this is incredible. We couldn't do a darn thing all over the winter. Here we are well into spring and we get crazier things have been known to
Oh,
happen.
I know, and if you just at that point, I'm so tired of it. At that point, I want the once you start getting into those warm days into the 60s, you don't want them to go away.
Right.
It hurts too much, especially at our age when you go from 60 to 30. We don't like that.
Was it T.S. Eliot who said April is the cruelest month?
Yes, it
That would be,
is.
and if we did get that kind of setup with snow in April, that would be, especially those who don't particularly care for the white stuff, a really cruel blow.
Yes.
We'll see.
So in the meantime, we'll watch the GFS and the NAM. I mean, the GFS is actually caught up to the NAM. The NAM's been very robust with this system for Thursday into Thursday night and early Friday morning for the Carolinas and Southern Virginia. Most of the models are on this page. The European is probably the least bullish of the group, but all the other ones are kind of on the same page with this. With this, and all this is really is the old cold front that's coming through tonight. We'll stall it out, and then you get this wave that's going to move along it. Here's your big high that comes down. This is all cold air, and again, the extent of that high is fairly large. I mean, uh, it covers 3/4 of the United States, 2/3 to 3/4 of the U.S. With all this dry air. And then as the high pushes down south, see the eye is down in Iowa. If the high were up, say in over Lake Superior, it would be a sign that the northern part of the jet stream is in a better position to bring this wave up the east coast. I mean, if you look at this on Thursday afternoon, it kind of looks like that precip is sort of it's kind of it looks like it's getting ready to point its way up northeastward up the coast. But the
Right.
problem is that upper trough is swinging around. And if you follow the blue lines here, folks, the thickness lines, you can see this is reflecting the upper air, and there's your upper air trough like that. So, which way is this going? It's going that way, across the Carolinas and off the North Carolina coast and goodbye. And for Southern Virginia, North Carolina, it actually might briefly start off as some rain, and then that cold air just really bleeds in and changes it over to snow. And your low just rides out east or east northeast and goes goodbye. The core of the cold air will pull out on Friday night, which means we'll start to warm up on Saturday. Sunday I think Sunday, Joe, I think we could get into the 50s if we have enough sun.
I think so too. I've got concern for a single digit temperature on Sunday for the lower Hudson Valley. I have 49, but that also means 47 to 52. Low 50 certainly not out of the question. So yeah, it looks like a nice balmy and a big jump. I mean, 10 or 12-degree jump between the temperatures we're going to experience on Friday versus what we're going to see on Saturday.
Right.
This weekend looks like a lovely weekend.
I agree. And this next low for later Monday, well, guess what? There's no cold air, so that's mostly rain. It doesn't really look all that impressive anyway. And then we'll have to see what happens. There'll probably be another stronger cold front to deal with at the end of next week, which puts us at the very last days of the month. And then after that, we'll just let the models do their thing and take us on whatever adventure they take us on going forward. But I don't, you know, it's there's no way you could point to anything specific at this point. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Meanwhile, WPC over the next 7 days, of course, all of this is front end loaded. You could see the 3-inch plus rains being indicated from East Texas all the way into South Carolina and southwestern North Carolina, and then the amounts tail off as you go north. This carries us through next Tuesday evening. So this includes the system for Monday night and Tuesday as you go further to the north. They have an inch to an inch and a quarter. I don't know, Joe. That looks a little bit overdone on the northern end, but we'll just we'll leave that as it may. And also what the WPC on their probability of at least 2 inches of snow. Actually, the numbers have gone up a little bit in terms of what they had earlier today in eastern North Carolina. They've got an area of 30 to 40% probability now, running up and down I-95 in eastern North Carolina. Lower probabilities as you go west, and then a bit of a hole until you get to western North Carolina, up along I-81 and up in the mountains, and the probabilities go up again to as high as 30 to 40%. I suspect that you're going to see these probabilities by WPC go higher still when we get there. I'm just pulling up their new map just to see if it's been updated, and no, it's the same one from before, so there's no change. I noticed, by the way, Joe, especially on the rainfall map, that the Weather Prediction Center actually updates that map fairly frequently during the day. Used to be they only did it at like 2 or 3 times a day, or at fixed times off the 12Z and 0Z. But now it seems like they update it whenever they feel like it.
Right, and the probability, the winter probability snow maps are still only updated twice a day. Once at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and again at 3 and 4 in the afternoon. So those are infrequent, but I agree with you. The QPF hand drawn uh, predictions are frequently updated in line with whatever is happening in terms of heavy rain or light rain. Speaking of rain, Adam Adam Lowe says since January 1st, we are running quite a rainfall shortfall. And I presume he's talking about up in our neck of the woods, which is amazing since the southeast has been so very wet. It just goes to show how everything is moving west east, and which is no good for snowstorms in our area.
Right. Yeah, it's been this winter has been no snow. Has been no snow. It's been to the north of us, and now it's to the south of us. And yes, the pattern has been unrelenting. I think the unrelenting nature of the pattern really boils down to that. The polar vortex up in the stratosphere being wrapped up like a tight little ball, and it's been like that pretty much since the end of December. It shows no signs of breaking down and hardly any signs of weakening. I can't even see any seasonal weakening that you should start to see, being that we're heading toward the end of February and the beginning of March, but it just doesn't want to let go.
Right.
Eventually, it's going to break down. It has to.
Since late January, the average temperature here in the lower Hudson Valley has actually now gone up 4 degrees. It was down to 5 degrees actually. The lowest was the average temperature was like 37, and now it's up to 42. So it is coming up, up, up. Or as
Yes.
Ralph, or as Ralph would say about his bank account to Alice, it's going up, up, up.
I so,
We got $74
want to
for
say we want to say welcome to Susan Romana, who's new on the chat board. Welcome and welcome to our the Joe and Joe Weather Show. It's nice to have you here. She apparently is from Paramus, New Jersey, as is Keith James, who's also on the board and not related to Kevin James, who's actually from the town next to where I am in Setauket, I
what's
believe.
the last name again?
Kevin James?
James?
Yeah.
Any relation to Art?
Oh, you're going way back.
I
I'm only going.
think he passed away, Art James,
Oh
many years
yeah,
ago. Yeah.
they've all pretty much gone, Joe. The ones we've known.
Yeah.
You know. You know what? I always hate to say this, but you can almost, when it comes time, you only hope that you'll hear Johnny. The last thing you'll hear is Johnny Olson's voice saying, Joe Rayo, come on down. You other, or actually, come on up. You don't want to go
Actually,
down. You want to go up.
Johnny Gilbert, who was the announcer on Jeopardy, this is Jeopardy. Johnny Gilbert, I believe, is 94 years old.
Nice. Yes,
And
he is. He's quite a ways.
and also still with us, Hugh Downs. He turned 99.
99. I saw that. I couldn't believe it. You know what it is, Joe? These are all people that I remember as being, in a much younger way. So when you hear that they're 99, when you hear that, Barbara Eden is like 85,
Right.
you only just realize that you have reached the third plateau.
Exactly.
Not even the second plateau. You've reached the third plateau.
What I've been doing of late is when my parents divorced, I ended up living. My sister and I moved in with my mother's parents, my grandparents, and nowadays I'm thinking about my grandfather, who was kind of like a surrogate father for me, and where I am in terms of age. I'm thinking about when he was the same age. I'm thinking now about back in the early '70s. I'm saying, my God, I'm now the same age as Grandpa when he was back in 1972. It's like, woo.
Well, I didn't meet my. Let me see. So didn't meet my grandfather didn't emigrate from Italy until I want to say it was 1967 or 69. He came here in the late 60s. My grandmother came in, I believe, in 66, and my grandfather came either 2 or 3 years later in 68 or 9. So I was already about 8 or 9 years old. Was the first time I met my grandfather on my mother's side,
Or
and
was he?
my grandfather on my father's side had he died in 1945. So
Right,
I never met him. But I
right.
had I had my grandmother's till very late in my life. I was 30. When my grandmother died, I was 36. I was pretty. I was very. I always thought I was very fortunate to have my grandparents, my grandmother and my grandfather, well into my 30s. That was quite a blessing for me.
Right, right.
Because grandparents are great because you could get away with murder with them. You did something wrong. You'd run behind grandma because your mother or your father wouldn't dare hit you. They'd have to go through her.
Right.
You know, so that was pretty cool.
And a famous comedian used to say every time my grandfather used to come, he'd say, "Well, anybody out there? What any kids want some money?" And start handing out like $10 and $20 bills. And
Yeah,
after Grandpa left, the father would turn to the kids and say, "This is not this. He was not like that with me. This is just an old man who's trying to get into
to
heaven."
heaven. Yes, I don't recognize these people. All right, so
Somebody just asked about Briller Jeopardy. Is
oh,
there any?
Briller Jeopardy. Yeah, hang on a second. I gotta load it. Whoops, what was that? Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Sometimes I hear strange things here. Okay, I can't do it that way. Hang on one second. I will load Briller Jeopardy up. It will just take me a moment to bring it up here.
And
In the meantime,
Steve Lapointe says Betty White is 98.
she is, and I always thought that I've always said that my favorite character that she's played in all the years was the character of Sue Ann Nivens.
Sue Ann Nivens. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. It was so brilliantly written. Okay, so let's see.
Somebody asked how old is Bob Barker? Bob Barker's in his 90s, so
I'm going to say he's about 93 or 4.
yeah.
Olivia de Havilland is the only remaining survivor of. I think she's the last. No, the girl who played Bonnie Bell, the daughter that dies in the horse accident. Clark Gable and Vivian Lee's daughter. Anyway, she's also. I think she's 75 or 6 now, something like that.
Tim Tim Veldman coming up with the answer about Bob Barker to Chuck Cardillo. Bob Barker is 96, Joe.
96. And you know what? Just have your dog, your pet spayed or neutered.
And Steve LaPalm wants to add Joe C is currently 61.
I'm 61 and going up. Okay, so here we go.
My half
Uh,
on Groundhog Day, by the way.
uh,
I'm now closer to 64 than 63.
okay. On this date, this town in New York State back in 1979, on this date, February 18th, 1979, set the all-time record low temperature in New York, which was this number.
Oh, so I have to define the actual location and the temperature.
Correct.
Okay, I'll take a wild guess. Old Forge minus 58.
Old Forge minus 52. So look, I'll give it to you. You were within
Missed it
6.
by that
No,
much.
you got Old Forge. Is there a new Forge, New York? I'm just I'm just wondering. I mean, if there's an old forge, it's got to be a new forge. Let's see. I've got another one here, another Briller Jeopardy answer here. So, because we didn't get to this yesterday, since 1869, the number of 12-inch snowstorms that have occurred in March
At Central Park,
in Central Park
12-inch snowstorms.
since 1869 in the month of March.
Uh, Well, we know 1888 was one.
Right.
Um, I know there was one in 1914, believe it or not. Like
Okay.
March 2nd or 3rd, there was one. That's two. Uh, I'll take a wild guess and say five.
Very close though. Only four.
Wow.
Only four. And the last one was actually 60 years ago in 1960. Was that the Ash Wednesday storm? Would they?
March 7th? Not, no, March. The Ash Wednesday storm was March 7th, 1962.
Okay.
So,
So this one was 60 years ago in 1960.
and that was just a precursor of that following winter, Joe. You think about
Right.
it, because then December of 60, we had a blizzard, the
Right.
Kennedy snowstorm in 61, the big snowstorm in early February of 61. So, yeah, that was,
Now, going back to 2 years ago when we had the four nor'easters of the apocalypse, the last one of those nor'easters I got at my house, we had just under 20 inches, we had 19 inches at at my house. I think MacArthur also had 19 inches out of that. So, and that was late in the month. Up
yeah.
until that point, getting a 1 foot snowfall on Long Island in March was a pretty tough thing to do. Not impossible, but pretty tough. But this was it was pretty far down into the month. So you got to have the setups have to be perfect as you start to get into March. There's a lot of other variables at play. It's kind of like getting snow in North Carolina in the wintertime. Okay, that is March snows up here. You've got to have very good to near perfect setups in order for them to happen, particularly as you get toward the second half of the month.
And I think that snowstorm, that one that gave you 19 inches or whatever, for that particular storm, I was out of power for several days here in Putnam Valley.
Yeah.
Yes, and guess who paid our town a visit? Governor Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo. He came down to the
They didn't get storms like this uh, back when they
uh,
settled, when they settled New York, you know,
for those
when New
people who
York belonged to the Dutch.
for those people who don't know what Joe is alluding to, I did it about 10 years ago. I did a two-part series for News 12 Westchester called Climate of Concern. And I think in part one, we had Governor Cuomo, an interview that he did immediately after Hurricane Sandy, where, of course, we remember everything was devastated in downtown Manhattan and whatever. And his comment was, when we first, I can't do this. I can't do, when we first built New York, we didn't have floods, we didn't have hurricanes, we didn't have storms like this, and we took them to task. We found at least 25 storms, tropical systems going back to like the 1600s. We looked up all these storms, and David Ludlam, the probably the best weather historian that you could possibly ask to look for this information. We had like the Coney Island. Coney Island was devastated in 1850, and this hurricane and that tropical storm and thing. So really, when he said that, I did like a double take. I said, how could he possibly have said something so stupid that when we were first building New York, that we didn't have these kind of storms? Of course, we had these kind of storms, and we will continue to have
Yeah.
these kind of storms in the future.
And we'll
But the thing that
continue to
made
have gas bag politicians saying things that are just blatantly false for their own purposes. Did
whatever
I
you
say something wrong? Did I say hello? It's my show. It's
yeah,
our show.
it's our show.
It's
Yeah.
our show. We can say whatever we want.
But that
Um,
storm, but Governor Cuomo came. This again is the fourth storm of the four Easter March.
the four
He
nor'easters
came.
of the apocalypse.
He came to Putnam Valley and he did a news conference or a presser, as we say in the media business. And lo and behold, Joe, within hours after he did that news conference here in Putnam Valley, something happened which never happened before. All the power came back in Putnam Valley,
No,
and it was I said, ah, well, there you
it's a
go.
miracle.
And by the way, the power was brought back not by NYSEG, but it was brought back by a company from Prince Edward Island in the Maritimes of Canada. apparently they put out the call, NYSEG, to hey, help us. All the other
Yeah.
power companies from not just this country but also from Canada. And I remember driving on down Dennytown Road and seeing the Canadians put the and I rolled them. I said, "So, how does it look?" He said, "We'll we'll it'll take a little while, but we'll get you back online a little bit later." There you
Yep.
go.
Stian Turstad, our friend from across the pond, I believe from Norway, if I remember correctly, asks, "Do we believe do we believe in climate change, man-made or not?" So here's how I'm going to answer this question. The data show that there has been a warming that has occurred. It's pretty obvious on any charts you look that there has been a warning, a definite warming of the climate. That's as far as I will go because I don't want to really kind of get into what will evolve as the political part of this question because um, the policies that governments need to set based on that warming is a political question, and I would rather not get involved in that. But the data shows that it's warming, and I'm a data guy. It's warming. Greater minds than I will figure out how much of that warming is cyclical, how much of that warming is decadal, and how much of that warming is man-induced on the environment. It's kind of, we all have impacts on the environment every day. When you open up anything you take out of the fridge, anything you buy in the supermarket, anytime you take a walk and you put your foot down on a patch of grass, you're having an impact on the environment. You're killing some insects underneath your foot, and that's impacting some other animal, maybe the birds that feed on the insects. I know it's just kind of a long-winded answer here, but the bottom line is, um, there's the scientific answer and there's the political answer, and I just don't want to get involved in the political answer. You want to tackle that, Mr. Rayo?
No, I'm not. I think you said it all. I do remember that the late great columnist Art Buchwald, who was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and I think in his one of his last interviews, they said, "What do you think you're going to miss the most now that you know that you're going to be leaving this orb in a very short little time?" And he smiled at the camera. And he says, I'm gonna miss global warming. You'll have to all deal with it without me." And that was
Nice.
that was Art Buchwald's commentary on the subject. So
All right, so you know what? Let's leave it at that. It's 7:45, and we'll call an end to it tonight because it's still pretty quiet out there. We'll save our energy for that when that day comes when we'll be up at 3 o'clock in the morning doing a live stream and seeing
I'll
who we
bet
can.
you, I'll bet you we'll get a whole mess of people watching at 3 a.m.
Oh,
today.
I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will. Um, oh, no problem, Stan. And thank you for being on here. I get such a kick out of Joe. I said this many times to you. I get such a kick out of when folks are watching from places that I may never visit in my lifetime, like Norway or Sweden or Australia or parts of Africa that we've had on also from the islands, from the Caribbean. Some of them I've been to some of those, but it's always such a thrill to get folks from all around, from not just in the United States and in Canada, but from all around the world. And I'm really happy to see them on the board.
Tim Veltman says my next class is global climate change. I'll give you a copy of my final paper in about 10 weeks, Joe, on the climate change science and political debate. Tim, if you're doing a paper on global climate change, you might want to look into uh, the PDO, the Pacific Dedical Oscillation, the warming and cooling of the Pacific Ocean over a cycle of 30 to 40 years, and how that may have implications on the climate overall. Where we were in a warm phase, let's say 30 or 40 years ago, and we were talking about possibly an ice age coming upon us, and then all of a sudden everything flipped, and now everybody's talking about global warming. That's one thing that I think is worth pursuing, is to look at the effects of the PDO on global climate. But again, that's just something for me to throw out to the masses, Joe.
Yeah, listen. I'm with you on that. That the decadal oscillation is for the Pacific decadal oscillation in particular. The Pacific just plays such a huge role in our weather year round. It's probably the biggest player of when you look at the Atlantic, when you look at Canada, when you look at the North Atlantic, when you look at the poles and everything else. I think it's the Pacific and the Pacific Jet seem to be the big driver most of the time. So it's definitely worth looking at. So
And Jimmy Z in New Jersey or NJ says, I think it's due to Beetlejuice,
yeah,
the
which
star that everybody is watching right now,
waiting for it to
thinking
explode, right?
thinking that it's going to explode any time or whatever. By the way, the latest telescopic views of Betelgeuse, it is a supergiant star. It's about 600 light years away, and now instead of looking like a circular ball, the thing is deformed now into kind of like a blobby kind of whatever. They're talking also about spewing uh, clouds of dust, which may actually be working to dim the light of the star, which is why it appears so much dimmer now as opposed to the way it usually looks. And other people are saying that the dimming is caused by the fact that it's getting ready to blow itself to smithereens. And by the way, if it does do that, if that star does blow, believe it or not, even at a distance of 600 light years, Joe, that star, the explosion, will put out enough light to be almost equivalent to the light of a full moon, and it will be visible all day and all night as well. So that would be an amazing thing to see. But whether it happens tonight, tomorrow, next week, or maybe not until 100,000 years from now is still open to debate. So whether it's also causing any kind of climate issues here on the earth, we'll leave it up to all of you
All
to
right.
think about that.
All right, so let's call it a night. We'll be back tomorrow, same bat time, 7 o'clock Eastern time, right here, the Joe and Joe Weather Show. So do tune in. Thanks for being here tonight, everybody. It's always wonderful to have a very lively and active audience, and there's not much else happening. So we'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Good night.